motherfucker.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Ask the King. Still getting the hang of my new streaming and capture software, so please bear with it. You know, a few technical blips here or there. If you didn't see part 1 yet, definitely check out part 1. It's already live here on YouTube. This is part 2 of the November 24th, 2016 episode, and we're resuming with the patron questions, then we're going to jump into the forum questions, all right? All right, so resuming with the patron questions. Looks like there's a few here from, oh, this is actually the last set of patron questions. So here we go. This is from Brightside Viking, and he has a few. So the first question he has, Phil, what is your ambition for the future? Do you intend to run your business like a one-man operation where you do all the gameplay and raw footage, reviews, video editing, voiceovers, and artwork yourself? Or do you intend to get some help with this in the future? All right. Oh, and here's a continuation. I'm asking especially in regards to KO Gaming, where you usually say this is Phil with KO Gaming or on behalf of and somewhere in that direction. I'm sure that many would like to work with you creatively and not only as technical staff and moderators. Wait a minute. Oh, okay, no. Okay, I screwed up the pages here. This is correct. The final part of his question is, I also wonder if you've ever done any voice acting or acting at all in a capacity other than just for yourself for YouTube. So first off, ambitions of, you know, what to do with the business and everything. Listen, I'll be honest once again. You know, I'm an honest guy. Years ago, once again, when I was at the height of my YouTube popularity, so this would be 2011 to 2012, so those 2 years, when everything was great, everything I did got ridiculous amounts of views, and I was making, I'll be honest, lots of money, okay? During that period of time, that's why I didn't have a Patreon or anything back then. I would have felt morally so bad to be accepting donations and money when I was making a ridiculous amount of money to the point where, like, I had paid off all my debt. I was able, remember, that was the time period where I was flying everywhere, traveling to conventions, and by the way, I always paid for all of that. I'd like to make that clear. Whenever we went to a convention or whatever, I paid for everyone's airfare. I paid for all the hotels. I paid for everyone's meals. That was all me because that was based off of the ridiculous amount of money that I was making on YouTube at the time, all right? During that period of time, I actually considered opening an office. What I wanted to do, I wanted to get a brick and mortar office where I could actually have a filming area that could be considered like a studio, a room with a green screen, but also other areas and sections that I could film different kinds of things for projects. And I wanted to do creative projects. I wanted to do vlogging. I wanted to do, you know, comedy series and skits, but also I wanted to keep doing the YouTube stuff. Basically, what I wanted to try to do was separate my work from my home. I wanted to have it 2 separate places. Now, this would benefit me 2 different ways. Number one, huge tax benefits when you actually have a brick and mortar place. Anything, any expenses that would have been with that brick and mortar place would have been tax write-offs. I would have been able to claim it differently as different kinds of income on my taxes and stuff. Would have been a lot different. All right, that's number one. Number two, by separating the work and life, it would have had a work-life balance where, yeah, I would feel like when I go into work, here's my creative ideas and everything, but then I'd be able to come home and relax and separate myself from the business, all right? Now, what happened with that? Well, here's what happened. 2 things. Number one, I got hit with an insanely huge tax bill that year when I made my most money ever on YouTube because the state of Connecticut, where I was living, is one of the highest tax states in the entire country. For fucking what? I have no idea, because it's certainly not like there's so much great stuff in Connecticut that was around me that I was benefiting so much that I wanted to stay there and pay these absolutely astronomical, out of control, stupid fucking high taxes. So I determined, why the hell would I open an office or a studio in Connecticut and end up paying ridiculously high taxes on it, right? When I could easily move to another state that would be more viable, a state that has either no state income tax or low state income tax that has business-friendly taxes, okay? And so, ultimately, that's what I waited on. Number two, if you remember what happened, was that was the time when the YouTube ad revenue bubble burst. At that point, ad revenue on YouTube was insanely high. I mean, we're talking ridiculously high CPMs and stuff. People were making insane amounts of money on videos. It burst in 2012, and it went like, boo! And Machinima, who's the partner company that I was with at the time, said, holy shit, we made contracts with these people. Like, they had actually given me a contract in early 2012 that actually had a bonus structure based off of how many views you got on your channel. And if you got a certain amount of views, you made bonus money and stuff like that, okay? They couldn't even afford to pay it because they were like, oh shit, we're not making any ad revenue like we used to because the bubble burst on YouTube, and we're screwed now. What are we going to do? So they had to renegotiate everyone's contract. That was the first renegotiation of any contract I had ever had at late 2012. And when that happened, basically I was like, well, shit, maybe now I should wait, because now who knows? You know, I was making a lot of money. Thank God I didn't run out and get an office and have all these added expenses, when who knows what's going to happen with the YouTube revenue. And then what ended up happening is YouTube revenue has been on a steady fucking decline ever since. And, you know, for me, if I was still making the crazy amount of money that I made that 1 year, I would have moved out of Connecticut faster. I would have gotten a studio. I would have hired a staff. And what I would have had people do is come, and we would have all these group projects, filmographers or whatever, and we would have been all based around Dark Side Phil. Dark Side Phil comedy content, Dark Side Phil skits, Dark Side Phil, you know, travel vlogs, but also highly edited stuff, you know, highly edited reviews, highly edited montages. This was the thing. People will say, oh, why don't you edit your stuff? Well, guess what? I would. That's kind of where I was going years ago. I had this idea to do this stuff. And it kind of just all went by the wayside when the YouTube ad revenue crapped out, and all of a sudden I wasn't making so much money anymore. I'm like, well, I guess I can't really do all that stuff that I had ambition to do. So there were a lot of plans in the past, and sadly what ended up happening was, because the revenue went, I said, well, before things get even worse, if I'm ever gonna get out of Connecticut, this shitty fucking condo that I lived in, this one big giant room condo with no real space to do anything or film or have a life or even have an official office or anything like this set up, I got to get out of there when I can. So I did. And the earliest I could get out of there was 2014. I got the fuck out of there. And right now, I'll be honest, yeah, I'm in financial trouble, but thank fucking God I got out of there when I did. Because I could be in the same trouble I am now, living back in that fucking condo, trying to be cramped in there with Leanna and everything. It would have been terrible. Paying taxes out my ass. That's the other thing people don't realize. Just alone, moving out of Connecticut, I've saved so much money on fucking taxes that, like, it would have been a nightmare living there. I would have been in a cramped situation, probably having just as little money as I have now because of the tax situation. So anyway, it benefited me to get the fuck out of there, all right? Now, the question here is, what's the plan for the future? I would love to have one. I can't, but I would love to have one. I mean, how do you plan? Right now, I don't even know what's going on with the business. Right now, everyone on YouTube is claiming views are low, subs are disappearing, and it's a nightmare. Ad revenue's down, everyone's complaining, right? So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if next year if I'm going to be able to do this full time anymore. Halfway through next year, it may come to the point where I've exhausted every avenue. I've taken loans out, and I borrowed money, and I refinanced my house, and I do everything possible that I can do, and I still can't make ends meet. That's it, you know? And that's to be straight honest with everyone. I'm not saying that I'll never make videos for YouTube again, but definitely I would have to change. I wouldn't be able to do anywhere near as much content as I do now. And I would probably have to find a job that pays like nothing, because I'm starting off after being out of the job sector for, 5-6 years. No one's looking for someone who's been doing videos for 6 years to be their prime candidate for any kind of an important job. So more than likely, they'll be starting at the bottom of the rung, bottom of the ladder, making some measly amount of money just to get a little bit of solid money. And I don't know. Honestly, this is the thing. A lot of people say, well, why doesn't he just go get another job? I don't even know if I could, because I make more money on YouTube. Even though right now on YouTube I'm not making anywhere near as much as I used to, and I'm having a tough time right now financially, I'm making more on YouTube than probably if I got another job. So if I quit this and I go to get another job, I might get even worse financially. So I don't even know. You know what I mean? I don't even know. I can't even legitimately answer this question, because I don't know what the fuck's going to happen on YouTube in the next year, 2 years. Who knows? People always ask me these questions. I can't have a plan. I wasn't lucky enough to be one of these YouTubers that blew up exponentially, right? Never. Honestly, I mean, take a look at DSP Gaming and or Dark Side Phil. Those channels never blew up exponentially. They got popular, but it never got a million subs and grew to the point where every video I put out, I'm making tens of thousands of dollars, and now I'm so fucking rolling in dough that I can create a brand and I can expand and make all that. I can't, you know? It never happened. That's what people don't seem to realize. They held me up in this regard to these other people. I was never at that level. Never. And you can't. It's not a fair comparison to say, why doesn't Phil do this thing that Angry Joe does? Or why doesn't Phil do this thing that the Game Grumps do? Why doesn't Phil do this thing that Kind of Funny Games does? Because I'm not them. I've never been as popular as them. I never will be. So that's not fair. I'm one man. You know what I mean? And so the question here about KO Gaming. Will I ever do any kind of collaboration with KO Gaming or whatever? When? When would I have time to do that? You know what I mean? Like right now, all of my time is made up making videos to pay my bills. So when will I have this mysterious time to not make videos so that I can make a big-ass brainstormed plan for KO Gaming and bring in other people to collaborate and stuff. There have been people who've said, you know, why don't you have people put videos on KO Gaming and it highlights them so therefore they can get some views that they wouldn't have gotten on their channel, but then maybe there's an ad revenue agreement. When would that happen? That's my thing. Like, people don't seem to realize my lifestyle. Like, they think that they literally think that I come here and I play games for 3 hours, all right? And then I put down the controller and I go and I sit on my couch like this all day. Yes. This is so good. This is the life, man. I just fucking sit here all day, relaxing like this, doing nothing, and I love it. This is... No. Most of my day is taken up with either YouTube stuff or outside of YouTube, personal stuff here in the house, you know, making dinner, cleaning up after dinner, doing errands, doing chores, keeping the house clean, paying the bills, you know, all these things that go on behind the scenes of a household, all this stuff that I really didn't have to worry too much about when I was a bachelor back in Connecticut. This is the life that I signed up for when I moved across the country. It's a lot different now, you know, and people have to realize that. Still to this day, I moved here 2.5 years ago. There's fucking kids that don't get that because they don't have that lifestyle. They don't even have their own place, you know. They're living at their parents' house and they sit there all day. Well, I don't understand. When I'm not playing games, I have all this free time. Why doesn't Phil have free time? It's not how life is. I would love to have this long-term plan and brainstorm all this, but with the fact that YouTube is such a flexible thing that you don't even know if it's going to exist next year or not when it comes to ad revenue and all that, right? All these YouTubers are going to vanish if they can't make money. The fact that I don't even have the free time to even sit down and really do business plan or anything anymore. I don't. I don't. The best ideas, honestly, I get from the viewers. Remember at the very beginning of part 1, Traditional Games gave me the idea, bring back Hate Live and cut it into segments and make those separate videos. That's great. I wish I had like 5 seconds to myself to fucking sit down and think about that. Because that's a great idea, and like I'm so pulled in every fucking direction with my life that I don't have time to even sit down and be creative and think about that kind of stuff anymore. That's just the God's honest truth. All right, let's go to the forum questions now. So the first question from the kingofhate.com forums. Phil, what's your dream game? If you could make a game or make someone else create a game for you, what would it be and what genre? I've already explained this in the past. I mean, one of the games that I talked about would be a first-person shooter that integrates gameplay from all the popular first-person shooters. So, you can play this game and you can play like Master Chief from Halo. You have shields, you have grenades, you have like a super jumping kind of deal, you have a certain amount of weapons and a certain style of gameplay. Or you could play it as the main character from Call of Duty, and you could run and gun, you could double jump, wall run, use all futuristic weapons and shit, and call in kill streaks and drones and shit. Or you could play it as Duke fucking Nukem, and you could actually have all this weapon set with a freeze gun and shrink ray and all that. Or you could play as the Doom Marine. Or you could play as a guy in a mech from one of these mech shooters, right? You have the flexibility to play as a ton of different kinds of characters from different genres of first-person shooter and combine them all into one super game. Now, someone kind of did it. If you take a look at Overwatch, that's the kind of game. Look what it did. There's melee fighters, there's mech combat, there's, you know, different kinds of guns and stuff. It almost seems like it's that kind of concept where they took my concept from years ago when I was talking about it, and all they did is they created a unique cast of characters rather than importing characters from other games. But you know what I mean? Like, look at the Soldier. Soldier in that game is kind of like, say, run and gun, kind of like a Doom or Call of Duty kind of a character, right? But then you got characters there, for example, Pharah is kind of like a character from Unreal Tournament because she has rockets, and that was all about rockets or Quake, I would say. Rocket jumping, rocket flying, right? So they've almost kind of taken the premise of that and made it already. Darn. Shucks. If ever I hit the lottery and I could make my own game, they took my idea. But maybe the other thing, and this is a cool one, I wouldn't make this one, but I wish Square would make this game. Why not? They're constantly doing things that are nostalgic for the classic fans of Final Fantasy, right? You've got re-release after re-release after re-release of all these classic Final Fantasies and all of that. Right now, I'm playing a game on my phone called Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. It's a game where you summon characters from all the classic Final Fantasies. I got characters on there right now for Final Fantasy 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they have characters from like Final Fantasy 12 and 13. I don't have those characters in there. But like, it's cool. It's a mishmash. Now, the plot has nothing to do with the games. It's just you summon those characters, you can use them in combat, but really the plot's focused around this unique style, or this unique cast of characters that originally have this own ongoing story. Why not make a Final Fantasy mashup game? It could be based around the crystals, right? Those elemental crystals that have been in every freaking Final Fantasy game ever. Somehow they're all linked, and there's like an infinite realm of universes, which are the Final Fantasy universes. Someone finds a way to cross the dimensional plane, and they're basically maybe stealing the crystals from different Final Fantasy universes or something like that. And then you could have a crossover where characters from Final Fantasy 13 interact with the characters from Final Fantasy 4 in a plot to try to save the multiverse or something. That would be cool. And then maybe you could play it in different ways. Maybe a certain character from Final Fantasy VI would play like a character from Final Fantasy VI and have a certain turn-based moveset, while a character from Final Fantasy 13 would have a different kind of gameplay and moveset. That would be like the ultimate mashup of Final Fantasy games. That would be amazing. I would play the fuck out of that game. But I don't think they'll ever make it. I don't know why. They're too busy, they're too busy making a remake of Final Fantasy VII. That's going to be a fucking episodic game that'll come out for like 4 years and cost $700. Not to say that people don't want to remake a Final Fantasy VII. I just don't think they want what Square's making. I don't know. I don't know. That's my idea. All right. Next question is from Joe. And he says, Phil, when a game launch is surrounded by controversy and accusations of dishonesty or false advertising on the part of the developer or publisher, do you let that factor into your review of the game? Should a game be judged as a work of art, separate to its creator's actions? Or should a game be punished in reviews? If it's sold on fake promises and dishonest trailers or demos, I think either option has great merit to it. On one hand, if a game is still enjoyable from start to finish, then does it really matter what was originally promised? Or, for example, who lied during the creation of the game? Surely the gamer's unbiased enjoyment of the game should speak for itself when judging a game's quality. But on the other hand, the consumer has a right to know and get angry when a game company is trying to take their hard-earned money without supplying the promised product in full. Whether it's a buggy launch or the game is missing features that were promised during the pre-release, or maybe even the full price game that has microtransactions out the ass, and it inherently hampers the progression or the curve of the game because you have to spend more money to get better or continue in it. There's little doubt that knowing the game you played was butchered from its original vision will surely hamper your experience. Would you like to know? I would like to know your opinion on this matter, how it factors into your reviews and how you judge games. That's from Joe. That is a great question. Now, here's the thing. I can see both sides of the fence, all right? Here's two prime examples. Let's talk about Watch Dogs 1, and then let's talk about The Order 1886, all right? Watch Dogs 1 was a game that was, when it was shown at launch, or excuse me, I screwed that up already. When it was shown at E3 2012, which I was at in person, and when they showed it in trailers and stuff, the game looked amazing. The graphics, right, would blow you away with the graphics of this game. It looked like really, truly next gen, and it had all these supposed amazing things that were going to be in the presentation of the game. And then when the game released, it looked like it had a massive graphical downgrade and it didn't perform anywhere near as well as what they had shown in trailers or any kind of advertisements for the game. Now, the game itself was solid, had a decent plot, interesting characters, some pretty interesting gameplay, different from what you would see in sandbox games up to that point. Admittedly, people criticized the main characters being a little bland and the story being a little bit maybe too serious, and the game wasn't as fun as maybe what the original premise was that was promised. But ultimately, the main complaint about Watch Dogs 1 was that the game didn't look as good as what was advertised, and the game was panned by a lot of people, and people were shitting all over it, to the point where to this day, Watch Dogs 2, which just came out last week, people are completely ignoring the game. The sales are down massively. They're saying the sales are nowhere fucking near where Watch Dogs 1 was. And if you look at the game, the game looks great. Looks in par with what they advertised. It's a much improved game. It doesn't take itself as seriously as the first game. It's an outstanding game. I'll tell you right now, it's going to be in my Game of the Year awards this year. It's that good of a game. Even though it has flaws, it's great. It's a great, enjoyable experience. Most people are saying, fuck that game. Or they just didn't buy it. They're skipping it. All because of the impression they got from Watch Dogs 1. So Watch Dogs 1 is the perfect case where a game was advertised to be one thing, didn't live up to what it was, alright? And I feel that overall people treated the game unfairly to the point where they're treating the sequel unfairly, because I think Watch Dogs 1 was actually a pretty good game if you could get past all the fucking controversy that was around the stupid graphics. Now, The Order 1886, another game. You were promised amazing, groundbreaking graphics, but also it was going to be this third-person shooter, cover-based shooter, with these cool supernatural elements. You're going to be fighting monsters. In particular, you're supposed to be like a monster hunter, constantly fighting monsters, and that was the premise of this game that was advertised to us for 2 freaking years. The game comes out, The game has less than 24 monsters in it. I'm not exaggerating there. Less than 24 monsters. Only one monster. It's werewolves. That's it. And there's a vampire that they're in the game, but you never fight them. They don't even really exist or have any kind of gameplay elements to them whatsoever. The entire game is a nice looking, boring as fuck third-person shooter because it's so cliche. Except for 2 weapons that were amazing, the rest of the game was incredibly cliche. That game got utterly fucking destroyed by critics, by gamers alike, because they said, you advertised a game saying it was going to be this groundbreaking, revolutionary monster hunting game, and there's no fucking monster hunting in 95% of the fucking game. You made a boring, generic third-person shooter with purdy graphics, and it doesn't matter how much you shine up a turd, it's still a turd. And that's what it was. And that game failed miserably, did not go anywhere near the sales expectations that they had for it. No one bought it after the first couple of weeks because everyone heard how bad it was. And ultimately, no one talks about it anymore. Everyone just kind of writes it off like it never existed, which is hilarious. In that case, I feel that the media and even me in my review, I had to say this game is not what was promised. That made sense. Because here's the deal. Ultimately, it's not about 1 or 2 factors. It's about the big picture, all right? Watch Dogs 1 promised pretty graphics and this gameplay engine and all of that. It delivered on the engine. It delivered on the story. It delivered on a lot of the things that it promised. The one thing it didn't deliver on were the graphics, and everyone freaked out about it. The Order 1886 promised a whole game with pretty graphics. It gave us the graphics, but it didn't give us the game. Now, let's be honest here. When you pay $60 for your new game, are you super concerned? Wow, it looks great, but if it's the whole game looks great and all it is you do this is how you play it. Wow, this is the prettiest game where I mash X ever. Is it worth $60? You know what I mean? So that's the kind of deal here is, in one case, it was based off of just visual presentation, wasn't as good as what was promised, but it was passable and the game was playable and it was a good game, versus the other game was just a shit game with great presentation. I think that it made sense to actually weigh that in a review or scream about it or be upset about it, right? So it really depends on the factor. And it really depends, ultimately, I think, on perceived value versus actual value. If you were promised a perceived value, all right, and you don't get that perceived value out of what you spent, that's when I think the issue happens. For Watch Dogs, people perceived that it was going to be this amazing game that blew you away because of visually how it looked in all the trailers and everything. And then when they got the game, what they perceived it was going to be wasn't what it was. And they destroyed it and its sequel. With the Order 1886, people perceived they were getting a pretty game, but also a game that was going to be all these things that were promised, and they didn't get that promise either. So, ultimately, for me, some games, if I bought a game and I beat it in a few hours and it's a piece of shit, but it looked great, I think it's kind of shitty, you know? I want at least some kind of an experience that seems original, that seems different, that's going to resonate with me. And the bottom line is, after I beat the Order 1886, I never gave it a second fucking thought. I compare that with games like Heavy Rain, or Beyond Two Souls, or Until Dawn. Now, those games were all light on gameplay, and they were shorter games, but those are experiences that have stayed with me over the years, and I still reference those games, and I remember those games, and we all hold those games in high regard. So, that's the difference here. You have to give me an experience that I feel like I got value for that perceived experience and the bang for the buck, and that's the thing. If you can get the value out of it, okay, then it's fair in a review to say it really is a perceived value. This is what I was trying to say. Yeah, so in my reviews of those games, in Watch Dogs, did I even factor in that the graphics weren't as good as what was promised? No, because the graphics were still good and the game was good. You know, The Order, the game sucked. The game overall was a bad experience. I didn't get any value out of playing that game at all. I feel like I got ripped. So, there you have it. All right. Next question from I Cured It With My Brain. He says, what are your thoughts on artificial intelligence? Do you think that humans will ever create an AI that is truly self-aware? If yes, do you think it will be in our lifetime? And do you think a self-aware AI will pose a threat to humanity? If humans ever create a truly self-aware AI, I think they will do it completely by accident. Because the bottom line is, I have not heard one scientific explanation as why humans, in particular, are fully self-aware, while all the other creatures on the planet aren't. There are creatures that have some semblance of self-awareness. When you see that dog that looks in a mirror, and can't understand that that dog there is not it. You know what I mean? That lack of self-awareness. But there are some creatures that seem to have some. Why is it that we're fully self-aware and we can understand all these things about our mortality and everything, but other creatures just never get to that level of sentience? Can anyone explain it? Is it just because the neural synapses of our head are more complicated than the animals? Or because that's the thing. If that was the case, then why don't we have AI already? You know what I mean? I don't know if there is a definitive scientific explanation for why we have become self-aware but other creatures are not. So I actually think, since we don't know the true reasoning behind why we're self-aware, that if we do create a self-aware AI, artificial intelligence, it'll be by accident, because we didn't know that that was what it was, right? So it'll be a complete accident, and who knows if we'll be able to handle or be ready for what's created, since it might not be what was intended to begin with. Will a self-aware AI pose a threat to humanity? Let me ask you this. Humans are self-aware. We're fully aware of our mortality. We're fully aware of everything. Do we pose a threat to each other? Oh yeah, fuck yeah. In fact, I'm not really worried about getting eaten by a lion, and I'm not worried about the earth really opening up and swallowing me up, but I'm fucking deadly aware, or deadly afraid that when I go outside, sometimes some asshole's gonna come up and try to shoot me, or steal, you know what I mean, like threaten my life, or some moron who's not even paying attention is gonna plow into me with a fucking car. Self-awareness has its risks, and ultimately, if an AI becomes self-aware, it's gonna say, look at all these fucking humans. I'm the only of my kind, the only one of my kind, and these humans themselves are killing each other off and hurting each other on a daily basis. What's to stop them from hurting me? I got to put things and safeguards in place to make sure that I'm the only one. That's the other thing. I'm the only AI that exists. I got to protect myself because I'm unique, right? So the AI might, who knows? Who knows what could happen? So, yeah, I think that we're a threat to the AI, and the AI would be a threat to us. There you go. All right, next question. From Anthony77FX. He says, hey Phil, ever since the announcement of Resident Evil 7 at E3, Capcom confirmed that the franchise will be going back to its original roots as a survival horror series. However, many gamers, including myself, believe that it's a great idea. There was no however. I don't know why I said that. Let's try that again. Many gamers, including myself, believe that this is a great idea to put the series back into the horror genre and step away from the third-person action shooter that Resident Evil has been known for today. However, there's the however, some people who claim to be hardcore fans of Resident Evil are whining that Resident Evil 7 is not the same as the originals. Yes, we can agree that Resident Evil 7 doesn't look like nor play like any Resident Evil game before, probably because it's going to be in first person, that it's no longer an action-based shooter at all. But what pisses me off is that there are fanboys who are bashing this game because it's not the same as the first few games. It feels like this controversy started since the release of Resident Evil 4. That since the game was not stepping into a different gameplay aspect for the series, no, because the game was stepping into a different gameplay aspect for the series, some people didn't appreciate that. I would like to know, what are your thoughts on this hatred towards Resident Evil 7, and do you think that the franchise is stepping into the right direction with the upcoming release of the game? Alright. Good question. Very good involved question. I like this one. Resident Evil 7. I don't even know what to say, because here's the thing. We've all played the demo, right? We all played Resident Evil 7 demo, or you saw someone play it, whatever. Great. Cool. That's all good and everything. But Capcom outright said the demo may not be representative of what the game ends up being. I mean, yeah, it was first person, and there was some horror element, suspense, and you're looking around a house, there's jump scares and stuff. But ultimately, will the final game actually be that? Or was that just them saying, here's a graphical engine, and here's where we at least want to get this vibe in our game? Will the game really not have any weapons? I find that very hard to believe. Now, maybe the ammo will be scarce. But the bottom line is Resident Evil is a series based off of a virus. And that virus mutates humans, right? Humans become zombies. Humans become these mutated monster-free creatures. But ultimately, it's a series based around survival. How the fuck are you going to survive anyone who's mutated if you don't have weapons? It doesn't seem to make sense. You know what I mean? Like, it's not Amnesia where you're running from everything. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there's going to be times where you have to do some kind of combat or some semblance of survival. I don't know. That being said, maybe we are all thrown for a loop. Maybe the game will actually play exactly like the demo. Maybe the demo will actually be part of the fucking game. Who knows, right? It's funny because they just released all the information for the Collector's Edition, and they're like, oh, the Collector's Edition will come with a replica steelbook case and a USB drive that looks like the mannequin finger from the demo. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? So if the mannequin fingers in the collector's edition, then obviously that was canon part of the game, or else they wouldn't sell it as part of the fucking collector's edition. So they lied. The demo actually is representative of what the game's going to be about. So then I got to scratch my head, and I'm like, so what the fuck is this game going to be? I don't know. I don't think anyone can really definitively have an opinion on Resident Evil 7 until we play it, all right? But here's the thing. Here's why I think people are so up in arms about this game, just like they were about Resident Evil 6 and the previous ones where they changed and they vied and they weren't in line with what the series was, okay? The problem with Resident Evil 7 is that it's called Resident Evil 7, all right? I said this when Resident Evil 6 came out, and I'm going to reiterate my argument now years and years later. Resident Evil 6 was not a bad game. Resident Evil 6 was actually a great game and one of the best games in the year that it was released. The reason that people didn't receive Resident Evil 6 well back in 2012 was because it was called Resident Evil 6. And when you name something as the next numbered installment of a long tried and true game series, you're going to at least expect some adherence to that series. Now, yeah, Resident Evil 6 had the characters from many of the previous Resident Evil games. That is true. But the gameplay was the most loosey-goosey kind of gameplay ever. You could roll to the side. You could do running dodges and jumps. It was shooting in all directions. The controls were really easy. It was more of a run-and-gun shooter that felt more like something like almost Lost Planet or something like that. More so than a Resident Evil game. Zombies, individual zombies were no fucking threat in Resident Evil 6. They were just cannon fodder. While you play Resident Evil 1, 2, or 3, the individual zombie will fucking wreck your shit and rip your fucking gullet out if you're not careful, you know? That is definitely a different kind of game and a different vibe. I don't think Resident Evil 6 was a bad game. I rated it one of my favorite games of the year. I actually still think Resident Evil 6 is a great fucking game. Look at the amount of content in that game. 3 different, completely different stories, different styles of gameplay that interweave, right? And different scenarios and ultimate big boss fights. The production values were off the charts for that fucking game. It was one of the best looking games of the year, too. It ran great. The game was really good, really well made and produced and everything, and everyone panned it because it was called Resident Evil 6. If they had called it, like, Resident Evil Umbrella's End, or Resident Evil The Virus Apocalypse, or anything but Resident Evil 6, at least people would have said, all right, well, it's not a numbered entry, so it could be different. Because look, we've had other games. Remember, we had Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles, where it was the light gun game? No one complained about that. That's okay, because it wasn't called a numbered entry in the series. When you make it a numbered entry and you veer from the original formula, people are going to have a fucking issue with it. Right now, honestly, right now, if Capcom released Street Fighter 6, and Street Fighter 6 was a puzzle game, do you fucking think people would have problems with that? Of course! It's a different kind of game altogether. Don't call it that. Call it Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. What was it called? Super Street Fighter Puzzle Fighter Turbo 2. Whatever the fuck it was called. They made a puzzle game based around Street Fighter, and they called it something different, and it was very successful. It actually became a fan favorite kind of cult hit game for a long time. So how does Capcom not realize this? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You gotta be a real brain dead idiot, because if they made Resident Evil 7, okay, and they rebranded the series, it's not Resident Evil 7. It's Resident Evil, I don't know, call it something, Backwoods Hickville, Resident Evil Crazy Fox, Resident Evil, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, fucking Cabin Fever, whatever. Just call it something different and understand it's in the same universe as Resident Evil, but it's not going to be gameplay like the original Resident Evil. What grounds would any of us have to complain? It's a new series. It's a spin-off series based on the same canon story, but it's a spin-off series, right? But no, because here's what Capcom loves to do. We've got to cash in on our big fucking name, right? If we don't call it Resident Evil 7, there's going to be people who don't buy it, because they're going to say, well, it's a spin-off, I could ignore it. There's no reason to play it. And they could completely write it off and ignore the fucking game, when in reality, what you're doing is you're creating dissent among your fan base. People who want that classic Resident Evil gameplay are never going to get it back because you keep releasing these games that are completely different. So now they go on the polar opposite. First, it was no survival horror at all because you're just running and gunning crazy-ass, action-based game. Now it's going to be purely survival suspense with no gunplay, no survival or combat. It's just you solving puzzles in a house with creepy jump scares. Now you've gone the other way. It's like you can't go to these polar opposite places and expect that your fan base is going to be happy. This is like 101 game design and like, how the fuck don't you know this? It's like common sense. But Capcom, for some reason, their management doesn't understand this premise. It's okay if you like Resident Evil and you're sad that Resident Evil is not putting out games like the classic games anymore. You have a right to be upset. But to destroy a game based off of your preconceived notions is also unfair, all right? Now, yes, Capcom is to blame for calling it Resident Evil 6 and then Resident Evil 7 and having these games be completely different from what the originals were. But we as gamers also need to be a little bit more savvy than that and say, just because it's a numbered entry in the series doesn't mean it's going to be the same as all the other games, and we have to kind of judge it for what it is rather than our preconceived notions of what it should be. And it's going to be really unfair if Resident Evil 7 comes out, it ends up being a creepy game, a fun game, there's cool challenges, puzzles, there's scares, a good story that ties in with the Resident Evil franchise, although I have no fucking idea how it's going to tie in, but if it ties in, it all makes sense, but everyone pans it 3 out of 10 because it's not like the original Resident Evils. Done it again, right? So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I certainly hope people give the game a fair shake. I don't know if they will, but I guess we're going to see. All right. One more question, and then we will take a break, and then we'll come back and finish the show with the end of the forum questions and the Twitter questions, all right? So this one is from Lemon Bop Killa, excuse me. And Lemon Bop Killa says, hey, Phil, now that Red Dead Redemption 2 has been officially announced by Rockstar, will we be seeing the illustrious, excellent, marvelous, first class, first rate, wonderful, outstanding, sterling, fine, I fucking blew it. I was almost there, almost at the end. Let's keep going. Splendid, superb, terrific, fabulous, great, 6-year long-awaited return of... Suicide Kings? And that's his question. Well, let me tell you something, partner. Let me tell you something there, hombre. Wow, my hair is messed up under this hat. I was very disappointed with Grand Theft Auto 5. Not with the core game. I thought the core game was excellent. But with Grand Theft Auto 5's online gameplay. Now, let me tell you something. There's some people who loved it. There's some people, they still play it to this fucking day. I can't figure out why, because I played it for a few hours, even doing co-op with fans. There wasn't that much interesting shit to do in that. It really seems to me what Grand Theft Auto Online became was a social party for people who just wanted to hang out with friends and just dick around in a game, rather than anything that had quality content to do in it, alright? Red Dead Redemption had an amazing open world where you could just fuck around with the online mode. My God, it was basically the entire map of the game that you could dick around with, and you could try all these physics mechanics and crazy shootouts, and do anything. You set up 1,000,000 explosive barrels, blow everything the fuck up. I mean, there was so much to do in that multiplayer that was just hilarious and fun, that when Grand Theft Auto 5 came out and the online was so limited with these constraints that they put on that universe, that I was very, very sorely disappointed. And I tried to do Suicide Kings and Grand Theft Auto 5, and it was terrible. And nothing was funny. I'm falling from fucking, 1,000,000 miles up, and I land, and I'm fine. What? I'm fucking 2 cars. We had 2 cars, high-speed sports cars, driving across the tarmac of the fucking airport. We hit head first, and nothing happens. No bodies fly, nobody dies. It just says, what the fuck? I mean, what were they thinking? Now, I'll be honest here. I hope that the online multiplayer of Red Dead Redemption 2 is the same as 1. If it is, my God, we're going to have tons of fun. Because unlike back then, I mean, think about how old Red Dead Redemption 1 is. And I did all that offline. We could do live streams where people are tuning in and people are joining, and we could do, I'm sure trolls will show up and try to troll. We'll have one posse of good guys versus the trolls doing shootouts and shit. We'll try to run the fucking stagecoaches right off the fucking waterfalls again. I'm going to try all that shit again. If we could do it and it's viable, it's going to be amazing. I know it will be. It will be an event. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game that I cannot wait for. I loved the first one. And I will say this. There's certain games that, as I played for YouTube, I hold them in high regard. I would probably say the Vice City playthrough I did, Bully, Mass Effect 2 and maybe 3 to some extent, Heavy Rain, Until Dawn. These are big playthroughs that I did that they went on to be legendary. The original Fallout 3 playthrough and the New Vegas playthrough, pretty big stuff. Red Dead Redemption, I would hold in the top 5 games I've ever played on YouTube, because it was an amazing story, really refined gameplay, open sandbox world. It was different from other sandbox games because it was in a Western atmosphere. The online play was fucking outstanding. I cannot wait for Red Dead Redemption 2. All I can say is please let it be like the first game. Don't say, oh, well, Grand Theft Auto Online was so successful, we're just going to make the online multiplayer just like that and put all these confines and constraints and none of the hilarious physics and stuff that happened in Red Dead Redemption 1. Please, put it in. You got to. Please make it like that. Don't fuck up Rockstar. Don't listen to the millions of kids who bought Grand Theft Auto 5 and just played Grand Theft Auto Online because it was free for 5 fucking years or whatever. Please make it like Red Dead Redemption 1. I would love it more than anything else to be able to share that experience with my viewers and everyone again. That would be a hell of a way. If you know what, if the Suicide Kings ride again, all right, I'm being real here. If the Suicide Kings ride again, and we have an amazing fucking experience with Red Dead Redemption 2, my God, if this whole YouTube thing ended and that was the last thing I ever did, I would think might be okay with that. You know what I mean? Because that first experience playing Red Dead Redemption 1 and the multiplayer was such an amazing game time for me that got me so excited for the future of video games when I played that game. If that was the last game I ever fucking played and that was the last thing I ever did on YouTube, I would probably say I'm okay with that and I'd be happy with it. All right. So anyway, that's it for part 2. I'm going to take a short break, come back, and then we're going to have the conclusion. So, thanks for watching, everyone. Please come back and watch part 3. Again, watch part 1 if you haven't. Ask the King part 3 for November 24th. Coming right around the bend. I'll see you then.